So this evening, it's my opportunity to tell you at least a little bit about a couple of trips that I made recently. I combined the two of them together. Neither one was as long as my trips sometimes are. And so reporting on two journeys this evening. The first was to Quito, Ecuador in June. The second was to the United Kingdom, Scotland, Ireland, and England, Scotland, and Ireland on the second one. Now, I think when you see this, you're going to say, Stan, aren't those kind of close together? I would agree. And I guarantee you, Carol would agree, they're kind of close together. But, and if you check your folders, there's another trip that I plan to make end of August, early part of September. That was the trip I probably would have really planned originally. But there have been a number of the young people that have been a part of the congregation through the years that have had an interest in my journeys, and now they are old enough to go along. And so if you're going to take somebody that's in high school or college with you, you kind of have to take them during the summertime. So wound up having 3 journeys closer together than I would have liked, closer together than I plan to have them in the future. But I think it turned out to be probably pretty good opportunities for all of us. And again, thank you. And I know I say this every time, but I think every time I say it, I mean it more sincerely. As I make an increasing number of journeys, maybe it's as I get older, though I'm not quite ready to admit that yet. It seems like they're kind of more challenging. So the more challenging they get for me, the more I'm encouraged by the comments that you make and the interest that you show. First trip was indeed to Quito, Ecuador, and this was really a return visit for me. I might remind you, last year I was there and presented a several-day seminar to the congregation there in Quito, one on Cumbernauld Avenue. And the topic they gave me was change to Christ. In the end, I thought that was a great topic. People need to change to Christ. If they're in denominational error, they need to change to Christ. If they're absorbed with the world, they need to change to Christ. So I had a chance to be there last year, taught the seminar, also had a chance to teach in some of the classes in the school. They have a preaching school there. But they invited me back again this year. One of the nice things about this year was I was not alone this time. Had an opportunity to take some of those with me that had shown interest through the years. In the picture there on the right-hand side, you may recognize our granddaughter, Sydney. And in the back and on the 2 seats, you'll recognize, I'm sure, Amber and Walter. Amber has been interested in the journeys for a number of years, and sometimes I would bring her a little gift when I got back. And in more recent years, when they go on a journey, she brings me a gift when they get back. So I'm glad to include them along. And this was particularly good, perhaps a place to take them to Quito. One of the places I visited, this is one of the places that I felt was the cleanest, the neatest, and the safest. So taking a couple of young ladies along, this was probably of all the places I've been, the one that I felt the best. Also, it's in Ecuador, Spanish-speaking territory. Amber and Sydney both had several years of Spanish. Sydney in particular, I think, had 4 years of high school Spanish, 1 year of college Spanish, and after a while, Sydney kind of almost became our default translator, certainly between us and the cab driver. I think they enjoyed, and Amber also, hearing and having a chance to try out some of their Spanish. And Quito is just a beautiful place. I was impressed the first time I saw it, just the way the city kind of in that bold valley, and the way it kind of climbs up the sides of the mountain. I thought it was a beautiful place to go, really primarily because it's a place where I had felt safe. I felt safe taking me back. Well, the workshop that I was supposed to conduct was not until Saturday, but they had arranged, and if you visit other countries, you will find that they will go out of their way to keep you busy, to utilize you while you're there. There was a Bible study at one of the homes of the members, about an hour outside of Quito. And you notice when you get outside of Quito, things are not as bright as they might otherwise be. Things are a little darker, and you can see on the right-hand side, if you live in a territory where there are lots of mountains, sometimes you go along some pretty winding roads to get to where you want to go. But if it looked kind of dark on the streets before we got there, that was not the case when we arrived. It was really, I thought, for a Thursday night Bible study, a really good crowd of people that were there. Lower left-hand corner, picture, I'm in the middle, and the people on each side of me. That's the 4 elders of the congregation. This was a Bible study on Thursday night. People had come from several different areas to this particular house for the study. All the elders were there. I thought that was great. It was a good class. I mean, not because I taught it, but there was a lot of participation in the class. And sometimes if you're in an area where you're having to work through a translator, maybe the person who's speaking is more accustomed to that, but the people sometimes are kind of intimidated by that. Had some good discussions. Talked about the qualities and the characteristics of God and why those characteristics are important to us every day of our spiritual lives. So, and they participated in the class even though they had to be translated. And after the Bible study, Walter presented a brief devotional. And they appreciated that. And they took notice that Walter was there with his daughter. And almost immediately they invited Walter and his family back next year. Their desire was that Walter would gather up some additional young people from the congregation and take them there. And people in other countries enjoy having visits from people in other countries. Now, Quito, it was a big congregation compared to most places I go. A lot of people go there, I think. But even under those circumstances, they were very glad to have people, visitors from other places. I guess that's witnessed by the fact I was there last year. They invited me back again this year. I will tell you, I think a lot of the good, a lot of the encouragement you do is just by showing up. If you thought about journeying to one of these places or not sure how comfortable you'd be there or how comfortable you would be teaching, just go. They realize what an effort it is to get there, especially if there's a woman involved. Jennifer can say from the places she's been, if there are young people involved, they have a great appreciation of the effort that involved to get them there. It's a great encouragement to them. Think about going. And if you're thinking about going next summer, you might talk to Walter T. Quito is a great place for a first out-of-the-country visit, I'll tell you. So, and of course, we had a meal. And those of you who listen to some of my other reports know that sometimes I'm very reluctant to eat the food in other countries. Not in Quito. Really had no reservations at all. It was delicious. And what was particularly good is not shown on the plate. What was particularly good was the salsa. We all love the salsa. We left that house that night with a little to-go package of salsa, and I didn't check for the final result, but the last that I heard, I think Walter and Amber and Cindy were trying to negotiate from them so they could get the recipe for the salsa. Even for those of us in Texas who have lots of salsa, it was really, really good. Well, then it was closer to time for the, I say seminar, really they called it a workshop. On Saturday, it was interesting. We were driving down the streets, drove by the building, and I looked and, I've only been there a few times before last summer, but all of a sudden I recognized there was a sign out front with my picture on it. So I recognized that, and that was the place where the workshop was going to be held. And these were the flyers, one in Spanish, one in English. Read the one you're most comfortable with. They want to talk about sharing the gospel. People, I found this in a number of places around the world, they're interested in evangelism. I think by now we've realized evangelism is not easy. Reaching out to others is not easy. So they asked me to come and try to help with that, and I had done a couple of seminars on that, but this was to be a workshop. And if you can tell by the flyers there, what I did in the morning, I devoted it to congregational outreach. What could the congregation, what could the elders do in order to try to reach people with the gospel? And then in the afternoon, it was more personal evangelism. And I tried to be practical. I tried to, in a practical way, say, really, we need to recognize that not everybody out there is the same. There are some people who are looking. There are people who are dissatisfied with something about the group where they are. They're shopping around, they're looking. And the past 6-8 years, we've benefited from that several times in this congregation. There were those who were looking, moving from congregation to congregation, or religious group to religious group. And they found us, and when they found us, they seemed to find what they were looking for. There's some who are looking, there's some who are not. There's some who just have no idea how important spiritual things are. I suggested to them that we need to take that into account when we're trying to reach out to them. And I also suggested, and I'd sent some of these materials ahead of time because the person who was going to translate for me wanted to see them ahead of time. I suggested that we don't all have to be experts in everything. I think sometimes when evangelism is presented or evangelism seminars are presented, it's like, well, you've got to learn how to meet people and you've got to be able to present with great skill some sort of Bible study. I just suggested that we could be a lot more effective if we work together, if we divide the work. There are some who are very comfortable meeting people and inviting them. Let them do that. There are others who don't feel that comfortable meeting strangers, but they feel very comfortable teaching a class. Let them do that. Just don't try to force everybody to do everything. And I think they especially appreciated at least that particular approach. I think we're more willing to participate in things if we can do something that we feel confident doing. So I suggested they divide the world up into the finders and the teachers. And they seem to appreciate that. The event was well advertised. They had people there from 5 or 6 different congregations, had over 80 people there for the Saturday seminar. And what I did also to try to make it practical was I had work groups, both in the morning for congregational outreach and in the evening for personal outreach. I had 4 different work groups. And I gave them assignments, very specific assignments. You go pick a group that you want to meet, to reach. You pick a particular mode. Is it going to be a sign? Is it going to be an advertisement? Is it going to be a flyer? And then what would you put on it? And I tried to help them make that very difficult step. I think it's difficult. Put the pencil to the piece of paper, and what would you actually say? And I wasn't sure. I hadn't done a workshop like that. It seemed to work. I sat back and I looked at the people, and there's the 4 groups, and you could see the hands moving, and you could see the people nodding and talking, and hear them talking. They seem to really get into that kind of approach. And then after the work groups, they each had 5 minutes, each work group, 5 minutes to tell the whole group what they had done and why they thought that might be a useful approach. So I could see them working, and that was encouraging me. They had very nice course completion certificates, signed by all the elders, signed by me. I signed, I think it was 81 of those by the time that we left. So then we were on our way home. But we were on our way home with a feeling that we really had been an encouragement to some individual members and an encouragement to that congregation. We were on our way home feeling like maybe we had made some suggestions to them about evangelism that would be useful to them in the future. And we returned home with an invitation to come back. So Walter, I know he's already thinking about it, has been talking about it, perhaps not just classes for young people, but maybe there could be some classes for women also. One thing that I have found around the world is lots of men will go and teach the whole congregation. It's much more difficult to find a woman that will go and teach the women. It's much more difficult to find a woman that will go and teach the children. And at least what I've decided is most important, find a woman that will go and teach the women how to teach the children. So Jennifer's been expanding her circle of the places that she goes. And we've got Walter and Lori. I don't know whether he mentioned it to Lori or not, but he mentioned to me that he thought maybe Lori could teach a class after they came there. So we'll see how that goes. Thought it was a good trip. In July, headed to England, Scotland, and Ireland. Let me tell you, one of the challenging things about these trips is finding a place to go. I want to find a place to go where I believe it's going to be a sound group of people. And I don't send them a 99-question questionnaire, but I at least want to believe that they share the fundamental values and beliefs that we do. And sometimes that is difficult to do. My contact in London, I got from a friend of mine in the Bahamas. The one in the Bahamas who introduced me to the people of Cuba, he's the one who introduced me to the preacher in London. Scotland and Ireland, last year was reading through the manuscripts for the annual Schertz lectures and was reading Luann and Dave Rogers, and they were talking about work that they had done in Scotland and Ireland. So I called them and talked to them, and they were the ones who provided the contacts for me there. Very, very grateful for that. But again, this time I was not alone. Another grandchild. This was Ian. Opportunity to go along, and his mother, my daughter-in-law Brandy, but also went through Atlanta. Atlanta to Heathrow in London is only an 8-hour flight. And I don't know whether that sounds bad to you or not, but some of the places you go in the world, a lot longer flight than that. If it's shorter than that, you really don't have time to eat and get a good nap before you arrive. So my suggestion is don't get one of these short 5 or 6 hour flights. 8 is about right. But it was an 8-hour flight. I think Brandy said that's the first red eye she'd ever flown on. But all seemed to work well. And again, a woman, a young person, traveling to at least encourage Christians in other countries, seemed to work out very well. So I mentioned my contact there. The contact was Eddie Fisher is his name. The guy in the Caribbean, the guy in the Bahamas told me about him. I found him on Facebook. I had several great chats with him. For a while they had a radio program, and I would listen into some parts of that radio program. In fact, they invited me to be a part of the radio program while I was there, except the people sold the radio station before I got there, so I didn't have the chance to do that. But really enjoyed that. He was working in secular work to support himself. So, unfortunately, he was actually in the U.S., I think in Boston. While I was over there, I didn't have a chance to meet him. But got in the cab, they had rented a small space in one of the old classic-looking church buildings in that area. It was the Tooting Church of Christ. It was good to see them. They fairly quickly introduced themselves to me as a congregation that was 98% people from Ghana. So I think the preacher from the Caribbean, I think he was the 2%. I think everybody else there was from Ghana. And I will tell you, that did not surprise me that much. When I went to Stockholm, Sweden a few years ago, the man who had started the congregation there was a man from Ghana. I preached a gospel meeting in Montreal, Canada a few years ago. 1/3 of that congregation was from Ghana. You know, in Acts it talks about people, Acts chapter 8, people who went everywhere preaching the word. Let me tell you, the people from Ghana are doing that. The people that are warm, friendly, just extremely enjoyable to be a part of them. I know Randy and Ian really enjoyed it. I think it's the first time these trips they had experienced the kind of camaraderie you feel with people in other countries. And it was great. They had asked me, they had assigned me a sermon topic. Usually I can go and just preach one of the sermons I'm familiar with, but not on this trip. People were assigning me sermon topics. The topic was hindrances to worship, which was interesting. I had not preached on that, but I preached that here, I think I preached that one after I got back, if you can find it there also. So it was interesting that they were all from Ghana, and in fact, at least 1 or 2 of them were from Kumasi, a city in Ghana, where I had gone a couple of years earlier and done some preaching there. So there were just a lot of connections, and we enjoyed that very much. Well, after I preached in London, I didn't have any other speaking opportunities until the next Sunday. So during that week, we did a couple of other things. One was we went to Wimbledon. Now, I don't want to turn this into a tour guide. I'm not showing you all the sites in London, but that was interesting. We happened to be there on the Monday. Not happened, we were there on the Monday that everybody plays. Now, you would think that it would be easy to find out how to go to Wimbledon and see a game. It's not. Now, if you want to spend several $1,000s for one of the venture tickets and purchase them in advance, you can do that. We didn't want to do that. But kind of the rumor was, well, you go, you get there early, you wait in line, and if you're there early enough, you can probably get in. You're probably not early enough. They have some seats they sell the day of the tournament. Those are much more reasonable. Those are less than $100. But you have to be there very early. So we decided, well, we'd give it a try. So we got there at 3:20 in the morning. And this is taken during the day. It was dark in the beginning. You see me sitting there. All of those people there, they were already there when we got there at 3:20 in the morning. If you want to be there early enough to have a chance to purchase a ticket to one of the main courts, you're going to spend a lot of time sitting on the ground waiting. When we got there, we were the 1,858th person in line for the matches that day. And you had to be in the first 1,500 to be able to get a ticket. We were there early enough we could get in, and as it turned out, during the 7 hours we were waiting in line, that somebody came along, one of the officials, these were not scout tickets, but they said, some tickets had come available at court number 2, so we got those for less than $100, so we got to see a little bit of an actual tennis match, which was just the luck of the draw. Got to see a little bit of the Pliskova match and then a Shikori match. So anyhow, that was one of the things that we did in that intervening week. The other was, one of Ian's good high school buddies lived down in Salisbury. So we went down to visit that friend and, of course, her family. And I didn't know about Salisbury. It turns out Salisbury is a pretty interesting place. Salisbury is where Stonehenge is. So they drove us out there and we had a chance to walk around Stonehenge a little bit. And I guess that's interesting. I don't guess we know exactly what it represents. I saw one sign there that said, it seemed like that somebody had positioned those stones in a way that you could just pretty well see whatever you wanted to in those stones. You could just have your own different kind of interpretation. But I tell you what was more interesting to me, and that is in the Cathedral of Salisbury, is one of the original copies of the Magna Carta from 1215. And I guess there were originally about 40 of them that were made, copied by hand, not on the Xerox machine. 40 of them copied by hand, there are only 4 remain, and the one that is there, people consider it to be the one that's the very best. There's a little place that you can go in there. I couldn't take a picture of it. You can look on the internet and see what it's like. But I was intrigued to see that document, which I think many people would claim had a great influence on the beginnings of this nation and the government and the laws of this nation. So I thought that was pretty good. So it was from the southern part of England, down in Salisbury, that we started on our trip across really all of England to go up to Scotland. Now you would think in a country that has all kinds of trains, a train trip would be easy. Not the case. I guess, sometimes those, you have an airline, you fly into an airport, and they won't change your baggage to the next plane. You've got to collect your baggage and check it into the next one. Those airlines that don't play well in the sandbox together. Well, the trains, they need a better train coordinator is what they need. Evidently, it's one train line that goes from Salisbury to the southern part of London, Waterloo Station. A different train line that out of the northern part of the city, the King's Cross Station, goes up to Edinburgh. So the $64 million question was, how do we get from point A to point B? Do you try to go down underground and ride their subways? Well, there wasn't a direct line, we'd have to change that. Do you just try to drag your bags? It's only a few blocks. And we talked to everybody in the world about that, and what we finally decided to do, we just got one of those little cabs, those distinctive looking London cabs, and we made it across town in about 20 minutes. It was not a problem. It's a train station, very nice train station, very interesting things. Not that we have anybody in the congregation that's interested in trains, mind you. There was a certain threat that if I didn't have trains in my briefing would not be approved. So we got the train and we got up there to Edinburgh, and the place that I preached was not Edinburgh, it was Cumbernauld, both in England and in Ireland. Really in the main cities, which would have been very convenient. I really could not find a congregation that I was comfortable with. I talked to some brethren that I trusted, that were familiar with the congregations in those two countries, and so both of them wound up being like an hour, hour and a half out of the main city. And at first I was kind of discouraged by that. I thought it would really be convenient, wouldn't it? When you get into the big city on the train, you go to your hotel, and a 5-minute cab ride away is the congregation. That was not the case. In both cases, we wound up riding trains or buses to get to the places that I was scheduled to teach. And at first I kind of thought, oh no, that's inconvenient. But then when I realized how much of the countryside of Scotland and the countryside of Ireland I was going to be seeing on those buses and on those trains, I decided maybe it wasn't that bad after all. But in Cumbernauld, Graham McDonald, he's been there several years. The congregation rents a space in this building, but they have already purchased land. I'll show you a picture of the congregation in a minute. This is by far the strongest congregation that we visited. Maybe it's only 40, 50 people. They have a lot of very active people. They have a building plan in progress. It was really encouraging to see that kind of work going on. I had a chance to preach there in the morning, and again, the topic they assigned me was inspiration, which I thought was interesting. I think if we were going to have a guest speaker in this congregation, I'm not sure inspiration would be the topic that the elders would assign that person. If you don't know that person very well, who knows what they might say about inspiration, but they gave me the topic. It's a sermon I preached here about the time of the trip, the link between inspiration and righteousness. There's only one way we can be righteous, and that's to be righteous according to God's standard. Amen? God's standard exists only in God's mind. How can we know what that standard is that exists in God's mind? That's what inspiration does. It delivers the mind of God through special messengers called prophets to man. If we did not have inspiration, we would not have a way of knowing how to be righteous in God's eyes. So the more I thought about it, I thought that was a pretty good topic. And I did that. And then Sunday night, I preached sort of one of my typical faith, love, and hope sermons, but strong congregation, very active congregation. You could tell they're active by the things they had on their bulletin board. You could tell by the number of different people in the congregation that were involved in the services. They kind of like we are here. They are blessed to have some of those kind of really late 20s, early 30s, early 40s people that are just very active. Many congregations these days don't have that. If you haven't visited around, they'll have a few very young, they'll have a few very old. We are blessed to have a number of people in that middle range. And so was this congregation also. The afternoon, we went home and we had a very enjoyable and a very good lunch with the preacher and his family. Had a chance to learn a little bit more about him. I think, if I remember, I think he's actually visited in Schertz before. So these people, again, this was a person I met because of Dave Rogers, and was grateful for that. So, moving on to Ireland, the Bible study in Ireland, there was kind of confusion, and only toward the end did I understand it was on a Tuesday night. So, from Scotland, we flew to Dublin, but we really didn't have time to go into the city of Dublin. From the airport, we caught a bus that took us out to Galway. You can see, maybe it says direct bus to Galway. Very nice bus. Countryside was just beautiful. I mean, between the fields and I guess the classic kind of stone walls there, it was just beautiful. Met Scott Shanahan, very interesting guy. He'd spent many years in the Pacific on the island of Pompeii. He was there so long he learned the language. Then he began to work in Scotland. And just, I guess, in the past year or so, I don't want to call it political, but anyhow, the immigration environment in Scotland has become such that he may not be able to stay there. Don't really know what the resistance is, whether some of the existing churches are resisting those who would come there and work and establish other churches. But in order to have a full-time minister there, you've got to own the building. The congregation has got to 100% provide his salary. It's just a stipulation that would be very difficult to meet. But it was a beautiful place. Some of the little towns, maybe out of the three, maybe Ireland would be my favorite. They, on Sundays, rented a seminar room in the Connacht Hotel, and so we arranged one for that night. Had a very interesting Bible study. There weren't a whole lot of people there, but there was a man from Nigeria, and there was a woman who was from Germany. And the woman there, she was not a member, but she was there, and she was participating in the discussions. And I don't know. I put even on the slide here, so if people watch this on the internet, they'll be able to. Scott will likely not be able to remain in Ireland. Of the three places that we went, if you want to pick one to pray for, I think that would be the one to pray for. So we rode the train back to Dublin and had kind of one day to kind of get our act together, get our suitcases rearranged, and do a little bit of sightseeing. And we did some sightseeing together, but after a while, our interests were different, and so I sort of struck out in a different area. I noticed this Dublin Castle here. I thought, well, maybe I'll walk over there and see my blue dot. That's where I was. It wasn't far. Then I saw this, the Chester Beatty Library. So I recognized that name from times that I had studied about early New Testament manuscripts. When you read the list of where some of the earliest manuscripts are of our Greek New Testament, this place has a few of them. And I was so glad that I noticed that name and went by there. Here, for example, I think with respect to the New Testament, there are only kind of three kinds of groups of manuscripts they have. Hebrews, about 200 AD, it came from Egypt. What was interesting about it, evidently, if you read more, these were in individual sheets. So many of the earliest manuscripts are on scrolls that were, rolled up. This was not the case. These kind were put together in books rather than scrolls. And these, one of the instances, is the earliest instance of the four Gospels and Acts in one book. And it's one of the earliest instances where they had a complete collection of Paul's letters. So anyhow, and through a thick glass, of course, but you were able to go there and look and take pictures, as you can see that I did. And I was so grateful that I had noticed that name and remembered that name. I mean, you're looking at them through a glass, but you're looking at manuscripts around 200, maybe 100 years approximately after the death of the last apostle. So I was excited about that. I thought that was kind of neat. So then we were gathered up to head home. We did a little sightseeing. There was a little tour you could take of a local island. What we're doing here is we're eating fish and chips for the third time. 2 out of the 3 were pretty good. We had fish and chips at Wimbledon. Don't eat the fish and chips at Wimbledon. But they were very good, and we enjoyed being together, enjoyed seeing some of the things. And kind of had a pleasant surprise here. Let me mention this briefly. After we got to the airport, we found that our plane was going to be an hour late taking off. Now, I had allowed 3 hours for the plane change in Atlanta, but that was going to consume 1 hour of it. So I was relieved to find that this is one of the foreign airports where you actually go through U.S. Customs and Immigration in that airport, not back in the U.S. I had seen that one time before. I think when we left Toronto, you go through customs in Toronto, you go through customs in Dublin, so that when you arrive at the airport in the U.S., you come in just like you're a domestic flight. You don't have any customs, you don't have any immigration, you don't have any extra kind of security. We landed in Atlanta just like people would land in Atlanta if they were flying there from Dallas or from Houston. And so that saved a lot of time on the other end, and we were grateful for that, and grateful for the safe journey home. And I'll say again, grateful for all your interest, your encouragement, your support. And in the places I go, although there have been some, most places I go are not places where I have a chance to preach to a lot of non-Christians, not a lot of people baptized. But when Paul went back on his journeys, he went back to some of the places where they were already Christians so he could be an encouragement to them. And I think we were that. I, Cindy, and Amber, and Walter, and Ian, and Brandy, I think we were an encouragement to those who are already Christians. And it's important that those who are already Christians have the right kind of encouragement to continue to be faithful also. Those who are not Christians, they need to obey the original gospel. They need to hear, they need to believe in God, believe in Jesus as the Christ, the Son of God. They need to have that change of heart. Luke 13:3, the Bible calls it repentance. They need to be baptized for the forgiveness of their sins. But it's not just about getting on the path. It's about staying on the path. And if some of you have an interest in visiting other congregations or other countries, I think you can be an encouragement to these people, to help them stay motivated, to help them have the energy and the commitment to stay on the path. If there's some here this evening that need either to become a Christian or you need encouragement as a Christian, please come forward as we sing.